What do you make of her passing?
Well, it's a big deal here. We're talking about a pioneer. This is a larger-than-life figure here in Washington, D.C., in the nation's capital, and, of course, globally, having been the first female Secretary of State in U.S. history. I'm sure Hillary Clinton would make clear, as she's indicated in the past, that she may not have had that job herself if it weren't for the road paved by Madeleine Albright. Of course, also the U.S. ambassador to the UN helped to assemble President Clinton's National Security Council. This is someone who was steeped in diplomacy and helped to drive the conversation in some very interesting times.
Joe, it's interesting as well. We're thinking about where we are at this moment as well. I'm taking a look through her biography and traveling to NATO summits, speaking as a UN ambassador to the United Nations. What do we remember about some of the biggest moments she's had on some of those big geopolitical stages?
Well, you know, it's interesting that you asked that because very close to her passing, she weighed in on this and said that Vladimir Putin would be making an historic error if he continued a full invasion of Ukraine. She referred to his revisionist history and his absurd assertion that Ukraine was created by Russia. So it's fascinating, actually, as you ask that, to know what she actually would have thought if she was on Air Force One right now with President Biden heading over to Brussels, somewhere that she spent a good deal of time as a faithful member of NATO. She referred to the Russian Empire and Vladimir Putin's warped worldview, saying that she was disturbed to watch what was happening, an attempt to establish the pretext for a full-scale invasion. And, of course, following that op-ed in the New York Times, he did exactly that. He is pursuing this full-scale invasion before our eyes.
And, Joe, I mean, sticking with Madeleine Albright's legacy, of course, she served as 64th Secretary of State from 1997 to 2001. What was the defining moment, would you say, of her tenure as Secretary of State?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, her tenure itself was a defining moment just in that she was a pioneer and the first woman to have the job. And having spent the time that she did in the United Nations, brought a very interesting perspective to this role as the highest-ranking woman in the history of the United States government at that time. But our policy in Bosnia, if you think back to where we were then in the Clinton administration, was one of the more important moments there. And in dealing with North Korea, this was you know, before we were talking about Vladimir Putin, it was Kim Jong-un who was going to be considered the great threat to the United States. This is back when a missile test would stop the world and would lead the headlines, and she was pivotal in dealing with those crises at the time.